going to be talking to you on this topic, if God is good, why do bad things happen? Which is a pretty intense topic. I'll never forget, it was early February in 2012, Sunday morning, waking up, and I used my phone as an alarm clock, and I hit the alarm button, and then I looked at my phone, and I saw that I had a voice message. And listening to it, it was my father-in-law. And that struck me as strange already because my father-in-law never really calls us. He always uses email. So I thought, this is probably urgent. Also, it's a Sunday morning. He just never, it would be a weekday or something like that if he were to call me. I knew immediately this was urgent. And he said on the voicemail, look, we're on Skype all day, wondering if you can just give us look us up on Skype and give us a call. And he was, of course, addressing me, but also my wife, Brittany. And so, a few minutes pass and we get on Skype. And as soon as we got on Skype, we heard the news that my wife, Brittany, her brother, who was in the U.S. Special Forces, his plane, there was a plane accident. The plane went down, and he was killed immediately. And the months to come, the years that would follow, were full of a lot of hurt, a lot of grief, sadness. And why do I share that story with you? It's like, whoa, it's pretty intense. The reason why I share that story with you is because when we're looking at a challenge like pain, evil, just the utter wrongness of what's happening around us in this world, but also to ourselves, if we've experienced pain, evil, suffering, it's not merely a brain question. It's not merely theoretical, intellectual curiosity behind the question. It's also there's an emotional component. Are you with me? Does that make sense? There's feeling, there's emotion that is struck by this question, and we want to know why. So what does the Christian faith say to all this? Now, just as a caveat here, I'm going to be speaking on the Christian faith and what the Christian faith has to say about this, but let me just tell you, whether you have faith or no faith, or maybe you might be here today and say, actually I have many faiths. There's a plurality of faiths element to my life. No one escapes the question, okay? So whether you have faith or no faith, you have to deal with this question at some point. Now, what does the Christian faith say? I want to respond to that question, and I want to do so by sharing with you a story. A couple years ago, I was speaking at a church here in Ontario. It was a small church. And after I'd spoken, this guy came to me. I think he was around, maybe in his 50s. He came to me and he said, I know what you're talking about. When you talked about the problem of pain today, I know what you're talking about. Talk more about it, because I know what that's like. And I knew immediately something was, there was an experience behind this question. So I looked at him and I said, okay, look, tell me some of your story. And he said, well, let me tell you this. My friends, I have a lot of friends who come to me and say, why do you still believe that stuff? Why do you have faith in all this stuff, given everything that's happened to you? And he said, Nathan, 18 years ago, my son, who was 6 years old, was killed in a car accident. And we're still trying to make sense of it. And he looked at me, he said, what do you have to say about that? What do you have to say about that? And what do you say? What do you say that in that moment when you know that actually there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of pain there? It's not merely intellectual. I looked at him and I first said sorry. I said, look, I'm sorry that this has happened to you. And I explained some of our story, how me and my wife and my wife's family working through a lot of pain at that time. And I said, look, there's no way we're going to just exhaust the matter. It's not going to be a comprehensive answer that I can give you right now, but let me just give you a few things from an intellectual standpoint that speak to this concern, this worry, this problem. And I said, the first thing is this. When you look at the problem, you have to think not only what does Christianity say, but actually let's do the whole landscape. One of our senior colleagues in RZAM is a guy named Os Guinness. A brilliant guy. He's a sociologist. He says contrast is the mother of clarity. Contrast is the mother of clarity. What does that mean? It means that actually in this case, when you compare and contrast different systems of faith, belief, you see that actually there are differences. There are differences across the board, and the differences make a difference. So let me explain. This is what I said to the guy. First, Christianity looks at what's happened to you. The pain you have experienced, the pain you are experiencing, and Christianity says it is real. What you are experiencing is real. Now, that might sound fundamental, it might sound really basic, elementary, but not all systems of faith or belief actually hold to that. Many streams of Eastern thought, for instance, would say that what you have experienced, if you today are going through pain, many Eastern faiths would say that is an illusion. But as one of my theology professors once said, if it is an illusion, it's a very painful illusion. That's not helpful. At a felt level, it's not helpful. We need more than that. We want more than that. Christianity says the pain in this world that you experience, the evil that we observe, is real. But more than that, it says it is wrong. I looked at him and I said, Christianity looks at what you've experienced and says it is wrong. Again, this might sound really basic, but not all faiths hold to this. Think of atheism. Now, I don't know about you. You might actually classify yourself as an atheist today. I have many friends who are atheists. But to be honest, many of my atheist friends, good guys, great people, but they actually, at the end of the day, they're smuggling in some Christian values. In many ways, they live atheistic lives, but actually, if I were to push them on stuff, they would actually, at the end of the day, be bringing in some Christian values. But if you push hardline atheism, atheistic thinking, to its logical conclusion, you find out that there isn't any sort of objective point of reference by which they can actually call something right or wrong. Many atheists, for instance, at a popular level, have said, to certain things that are just horrible, they would say, look, this is not right or wrong. I would just say, I do not like it. So things that we would say, look, that is categorically wrong, many atheists would say, many popular atheists would say, well, no, I wouldn't call that right or wrong. I would just call that, well, I don't like it. Christianity says the pain that you've experienced, the evil in this world, is wrong. It's real and it's wrong. But more than that, Christianity tells a story of a God who has gotten involved in the problem. So when we're talking about the Christian God, we're talking about a God who's actually not distant, not disconnected from our world. But first, the Christian faith says, look, the world in which you and I live is broken. It's messed up. There's disorder. There's a wrongness to it. But God has gotten involved in it. There's a story told. If you're familiar with the Bible at all, they're called Gospels. They're eyewitness accounts. They're biographies of the life of Jesus. John's Gospel, giving us accounts of the life and teaching of Jesus Christ. There, in the 11th chapter of John, tells the story of a guy named Lazarus, who is one of Jesus' very close friends. Jesus is in a separate town in this story. And friends send a message to Jesus saying, look, Jesus, Lazarus is not feeling well. He's dying. He's very ill. You've got to come and see him. With delay, Jesus makes his way over to see Lazarus with his friends. But the problem is when he gets there, it's too late. His friend Lazarus has died. And if you know the story, even if you haven't, I encourage you to just read it because you can actually feel the sadness in the story. Jesus comes to the separate town, and the women come out of the house, these friends, and they're weeping, they're sobbing, and they're saying, look, Jesus, you could have done something about this if you came earlier. You're too late. And the amazing thing about this is, just think about it. Jesus Christ, God in flesh, he could have done something about this. I would think if he knew, he's God, maybe he should correct them. Say, hey, look, no, hey, I'm going to do something about this. He doesn't correct them. He weeps with them. What does that tell us? It tells us that actually, for those of us in this room right now who might be experiencing pain, maybe loneliness, physical pain, emotional pain, God does not come to you and correct you. He weeps with you. In the story of Lazarus, we see sadness. Jesus weeps, but also he's angry. 3 times in that narrative, John, telling the story, uses the word in the Greek that describes, in the English, where we get the words furious indignation. he was not only sad, Jesus was sad, but he was upset. He was angry at this. Why? Because he looked at this situation and he looked around and looked into the face of death. And he knew this is not the way it ought to be. This is not the way it was meant to be. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. It's amazing. More than that, Jesus goes to the cross, takes on the enormity of evil, pain, and suffering, and defeats it. What does that tell us? It tells us that death does not have the last say. It tells us that actually the last word is actually given to us by God. God has the last word, and that word is love. It also tells us that actually the world in which you and I live, it is messed up. Christianity acknowledges that. But it says the world that is broken, messed up, is not the world that will be. The world that is, it is not the world that will be. It's really interesting. Paul, writer in the New Testament, again, in the second half of the Bible, he's writing to a group called Corinthians. Corinth was a place in Greece. And Paul says this, "O death, where's your victory? O death, where's your sting?" Now, it's interesting because some commentators, when they've looked at this, they said, oh, Paul is doing poetry here. He's waxing. But there's one scholar I love. He's a lead guy on the resurrection. And he says, look, Paul is not doing poetry here, okay? Paul is not saying, "O death, where is thy sting? O death, where is thy victory?" No, he is trash-talking death. Paul is trash-talking death. He's saying, death, you think you've got something? You think you've got something? No, you've been beaten. Death, you have been beaten. You've lost. That is what the cross of Christ, not only the cross of Christ, but Jesus' resurrection tells us, that actually life, true life, can be found in him. The pain, evil, the suffering that we see in this world, but also the pain that you've experienced, is real. It's wrong. But the Christian story tells us that actually God has gotten involved in the issue. And the world that is not the world that will be. There's a lot of hope in that. Especially when you start comparing and contrasting to other systems of faith. Okay, hey, thanks for listening.